The checklist was supposed to make the job easier. That was what the day supervisor told me on my first shift. The building was an old insurance annex on the edge of a half-empty office park, 4 floors above ground, 1 basement level below, and just enough remaining tenants to keep the lights on in some sections and let the rest feel abandoned by comparison. I worked the overnight close from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. Most nights it was simple. Walk each floor. Check that the stairwell doors latched. Make sure the copy rooms were empty. Lock the records office. Confirm the lobby side entrance was chained. Initial the clipboard and leave it on the desk for the morning guard. The checklist covered all of it in tidy printed lines with little empty boxes beside each task. The first time I saw the extra instruction, I thought somebody was messing with the new guy. It was my 3rd night on the job. I had just finished the 2nd floor walk when I came back to the desk and noticed a handwritten line at the bottom of the page. Check the 3rd door again. That was all it said. No initials, no arrow, no note explaining what 3rd door it meant. The handwriting was thin and upright, almost careful. I assumed the day shift had added something and forgotten to mention it, so I took the clipboard back upstairs and counted doors from the north end of the 2nd floor service corridor because that was the only place on the route where 3rd door sounded like a thing somebody might say. The 3rd door was a locked storage room used for old monitors and spare desk chairs. It was shut. I tugged the handle twice, wrote a question mark next to the added line, and moved on. The next morning, the paper was gone from the board. The supervisor on day shift was a woman named Denise, who had worked there long enough to stop trying to make the building sound ordinary. When I asked her about the extra note, she frowned like I had reminded her of a coworker she disliked and said she had not written anything on my sheet. I showed her the photo I had taken of it on my phone. She stared at it for a second, then said, "If somebody from cleaning added it, they should have told me." I asked what the 3rd door was supposed to be. She said, "There isn't supposed to be a 3rd door, not on the checklist." Then she told me not to worry about it. That would have worked if the line had not come back. Night 4, different sheet, same printed tasks, same careful handwriting at the bottom. Check the 3rd door again. This time the line was already there when I started my shift. I checked with Denise before she left. She denied writing it again. She looked more annoyed than unsettled, which made me feel stupid for asking. So I did the same thing as the night before. 2nd floor service corridor account from the north end, 3rd door locked. The knob did not move, the hinges were still. The little room beyond the metal door stayed silent. I came back downstairs and crossed out the handwritten note with my pen. An hour later, while I was doing the basement boiler room round, my radio crackled with a burst of static so sharp it made me jerk it away from my ear. Nothing followed. When I got back to the desk, the checklist was still on the clipboard. My line through the extra instruction was gone. The words were fresh again. Check the 3rd door again. I remember looking around the empty lobby before I picked the board up, as if I expected to catch someone crouched behind a chair with a pen in their hand. There was nobody. The front doors reflected only my own shape and the dim parking lot outside. The monitor wall beside the desk showed the same quiet feeds it always did. Lobby, loading dock, 2nd floor corridor, stairwell landings, side entrance. I took the whole clipboard with me when I went upstairs. The 2nd floor hall smelled like dust and old air conditioning. Half the overhead panels had been replaced with newer LEDs, but the rest still buzzed faintly with that office building frequency that gets under your nerves if you're alone with it long enough. I counted doors more carefully this time. 1, 2, 3. Storage room, still shut, still locked. I put my hand against the metal and felt something that made me leave it there a second longer than I wanted to. Not warmth, not cold, exactly. The faint vibration of movement on the other side, like someone inside shifting their weight against a concrete floor. I took my hand back and listened. Nothing. No shuffling, no breathing, no sound at all. I told myself it had to be the building, air in the pipes, elevator machinery, a unit kicking on somewhere between floors. Then I looked down and realized the checklist in my hand had changed again. There was a second line under the first now written in the same thin hand. It is not locked if it opens inward. I went downstairs so fast I nearly missed the last step. That was the first night I thought about quitting. Instead, I reported it. The property manager, a man named Elliot who wore his tie too tight even at midnight, came in the next afternoon and treated the whole thing like a minor liability issue. He reviewed the camera feed around the security desk, confirmed nobody had approached the clipboard while I was away, then asked if I had written the extra notes myself as some kind of joke. I told him no. He asked whether the 2nd floor storage room was actually in use. Denise said not since the spring. Elliot had maintenance open it before my next shift, just to settle the matter. I watched from the hall while the maintenance guy forced the swollen latch and pulled the door inward. The room was barely larger than a walk-in closet, broken monitor stands, 2 old office chairs, a stack of toner boxes, no second exit, no dropped ceiling panel, no person hiding inside. The maintenance guy laughed and asked if this was where the ghost lived, Elliot told him to shut up. Then he put a strip of tamper tape across the frame and told me that if the note came back, I was to call him directly. That night, the checklist was clean when I started. No extra line. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt the kind of waiting tension you get before a storm actually breaks, when the air has already decided what it is going to do and all that is left is for you to stand under it. At 10:12, while I was checking the side entrance chain, my radio popped with the same burst of static. At 10:18, the second floor corridor camera flickered black for one frame. At 10:21, the building fire panel chirped once and reset itself. At 10:26, I came back to the desk and found a fresh checklist clipped over the old one even though I had not replaced it. All the printed tasks were the same. At the bottom, in the same thin upright handwriting, there was only one line. "Do not let the third door stand open," I called Elliot. He sounded more tired than alarmed, which somehow made me angrier. He said I could leave the checklist alone until morning and he would review the cameras again. I asked what he wanted me to do if the storage room was open. There was a pause just long enough to matter before he said, "It won't be." Then he hung up. I went up anyway. The second floor corridor was dimmer than usual because one of the older fixtures near the north end had gone half dead, leaving a pulse of weak fluorescent light that made the shadows between doors seem to breathe. I counted as I walked. 1, 2, 3. The tamper tape hung in a clean broken strip from the latch. The door was open maybe 2 inches. That small gap changed the whole hallway. It should not have, but it did. It made the corridor feel arranged instead of empty, like every other door was there only to make that one stand out. I stopped 5 feet away and listened. No voices, no movement, just the buzz from the dying light fixture and the distant thump of the HVAC on another floor. I radioed the desk, stupidly, forgetting I was the one holding the other end. Static answered, "So I did the thing you do in a bad dream and know not to do while you're doing it." I took one step closer and pushed the door open the rest of the way. The room looked exactly as it had that afternoon. Broken stands, old chairs, boxes, no person, no animal. Nothing that explained the tape or the note, or why my pulse had suddenly jumped high enough to make my vision feel sharp at the edges. Then I noticed the far wall. There was no window in the room, but the back corner looked darker than the rest in a way that did not match the overhead light. Not shadowed, occupied. I cannot describe it any better than that. My brain kept trying to assign it shape and failing. At one glance, it looked like extra darkness between stacked boxes. At the next, it looked like somebody tall standing just behind them, only the proportions were wrong, too narrow in one place, too broad in another, as if the outline changed every time the fluorescent light buzzed. I backed out immediately and pulled the door shut. The latch caught. As soon as it clicked, the corridor light near the north end steadied and stopped pulsing. I stood there with my hand still on the knob until the radio burst with static again, and Elliot's voice came through so distorted I could barely make out the words. "Did you open it?" I said yes. The answer that came back was clear. "Don't do that again." Then the line went dead. I spent the rest of the shift downstairs with the clipboard in front of me and every second floor camera pinned to the monitor wall. Nothing moved. No doors opened. No shadows crossed the hall. At 1:07 a.m., while I was staring hard enough at the corridor feed to make my eyes ache, the checklist beside me made a dry, papery sound like someone sliding a hand across it. I looked down. The extra line had changed. Now it said, "If it is outside the room, do not count doors from the north end." I did not go back upstairs. I stayed in the chair until 3 a.m. with the lobby lights on full and the radio volume low, and my eyes moving from the monitor wall to the checklist to the front doors and back again. Denise came in early when I called her from the parking lot. For the first time since all this started, she looked scared before I even showed her the page. She asked whether Elliot had spoken to me. I told her only that he knew about the door. She rubbed both hands over her face and said, "He should have told somebody sooner." That was how I learned there had been a previous night guard before me. He lasted 6 weeks. According to Denise, his reports got stranger as time went on. He kept leaving notes about a storage room checklist item that nobody else could find on the paper afterward. He said one hall camera showed an extra door where the wall should have been. He said the count changed depending on which direction he walked the corridor. Then one morning he came off shift white as paper, handed in his keys, and said he had finally checked the wrong third door. Nobody saw him again. I asked why none of that had been passed on to me. Denise gave a short, humorless laugh and said, "Because Elliot thought if nobody talked about it, it would stay on the second floor." I should have quit on the spot. Instead, I went back one last night because I wanted my last paycheck and because some part of me still believed that if I observed the problem carefully enough, it would shrink back into being a building issue. The checklist was waiting on the clipboard when I arrived. No normal printed form this time, just one page torn from a yellow legal pad, 3 lines, all in that same careful hand. Walk the second floor. Count from the south end. Do not stop at the third door. The hall camera for the second floor was already dark. Not dead, not static, just black as if the lens had been covered from the other side. I called Elliot and got no answer. I called Denise and got voicemail. Then the radio hissed, and a man's voice I had never heard before said, very calmly, "If you stay downstairs, it will use the stairs." I still do not know whether that was a real transmission or whether I only heard it because I was waiting to hear anything at all. But it got me moving. I took the stairwell to 2 and came out into a corridor that felt longer than it had any right to be. The north light was dead again. The far end looked grainy and distant in the half-dark, like an old photocopy of a hallway instead of a real one. I remembered the note, "Count from the south end." So I turned away from the storage room and began at the other side. 1, 2, 3. The third door from the south end was not the storage room. It was a plain office with frosted glass and a nameplate that had been removed years earlier. I know that because I had checked that same locked office every shift and never thought about it twice. Tonight the door stood open a hand's width, and the room beyond was dark. Something moved inside it with the same slow wooden scrape I had first heard from the storage room nights earlier. I did not go closer, I did not need to. At the far end of the corridor behind me now, I heard the storage room latch click open on its own, then another door clicked, then another, not random, in sequence. A sound moving down the hall one door at a time, as if something was checking them in order and coming toward me. I ran for the stairwell, not elegantly, not bravely. I dropped the radio, hit the wall hard at the landing, and nearly missed the first step down because I was listening to the clicks behind me multiply into a steady rhythm. Door, closer each time. When I reached the lobby, the checklist was back on the desk where I had left it, only now there was one last line at the bottom. If you make it downstairs before it reaches the right door, it will wait for your replacement. That was the last shift I worked in that building. Elliot told me over the phone the next day that I was overreacting and that the property could not keep training new guards every time somebody decided the halls felt weird at night. I asked him how many people had quit over the checklist. He did not answer directly, he just said, "It doesn't happen on every shift." 6 months later, Denise emailed me a photo with no message. It showed a clipboard on the same security desk under the same fluorescent lights. The paper clipped to it was a blank onboarding checklist for new overnight staff. At the bottom, in that same thin, careful hand, someone had written, "Make sure he counts from the north end first."